Excellent. Well, Robert, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, in the world of business and technology, you've been in it for quite a while. How did your world change getting through the pandemic, going through that time period, and even up to now? How much of that time period has created ripples that you're still feeling now in 2024?
From the pandemic, I didn't really experience much like downturn from the pandemic because I've been remote working since a very young age. And I mean, I left the corporate world, like the office world in 2018. And then the pandemic hits like a couple years later. And so it really didn't impact me a whole lot. I think the biggest thing that impacted me at the time was I was living in Argentina, and they had very strict government restrictions. And I had to find ways to kind of deal with that and get out and move to a more permission, like a location with better permissions. And I've always been like working remotely, so I never really felt that impact very much.
So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do right now on a daily basis so people can understand exactly what you do. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids at career day. Let's say they're third graders, 10, 11-year olds. And one of the curious kids in the back of the room is like, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer them?
Well, my standard answer is I'm an entrepreneur and investor, and I build things that people want to use. So throughout my career, I basically just look at what people need, what people will pay for, and I go out and build that. So my skills is very much within technology and software development and trying to build things that people need. Right now, I work in crypto. I've been working in crypto industry for roughly like 5 or 10 years now. And so I build crypto products. And so, but this is really just a mechanism or a tool that we use to bring products to people that everyday people use on a daily basis. So that's kind of my pitch is like I look for what people need and I go out and build those things.
So was your dream since you were like say in the third grade always to be in technology? What was that ultimate dream for you growing up?
Yeah, I would say my dream has always been to kind of model after Bill Gates. I think Bill Gates was like my early role model when I was growing up. Like a lot has changed since then, but that was always my role model for like what I wanted to do because that was like the aspiration. Like he was this guy who just built a software company. I was very much into software and he was building all sorts of things. And then he went into video games and it was all very fascinating. And so from a very early age, that's what I've been interested in, like even in elementary school. And then it wasn't until like 12 or 13 when I started actually developing software and I started figuring out, okay, I can tell computers what I wanted to do. And that's when I started having like more grander visions of like, okay, this is probably going to go somewhere because at that time technologies or computers in general weren't really um like people didn't really see the full vision of what they were capable of, but I always had that vision because I figured out that I can tell computers what to do. And this was at a time where like most people were just trying to run software. It's like, well, I can actually build the software. I tried to figure out how to build that software. And then like my first taste for this was building video games and getting my friends to play them. So this was around when I was 13 when I saw like people were playing these video games. I'm like, hey, I could make one of these. And so I took one and I kind of started dissecting it and taking it apart. And my way of learning was like trying to delete things and then figuring out what broke. And then that was the way for me to figure out, oh, like that does this function. And then after a while, I started like changing different things and started with like just changing the storyline. So like it'd be the same game, but like maybe they're saying different text, and then it'd be changing colors of characters. And then eventually I built a whole game from scratch where it's basically just like jumping from different levels, of different platforms and then going through different levels. So that was kind of my introduction to like software. And from there, I just knew that that was something that I really wanted to continue on doing.
So, are you a Windows guy or a Mac guy? Where do you kind of fall in that whole language culture world?
I use both. So up until like around a year ago, I was using a MacBook with Windows installed on it. Now I use predominantly Windows, but with Linux installed on it. So I try not to box myself in. I like to use all the operating systems and make sure that I have familiarity with all of them. My preference at this stage is very much Unix based, so Linux based um, systems, just because it allows me to do a lot more. I do like the ease of Windows, and I do like that with Windows I can install it on just about anything. I've kind of moved away from Mac. I would say Apple products. I really got into Apple products around 2008, when the iPhone was just coming into popularity. And I really liked what they were doing and how they were really innovating, because before that, I was using like what was before the smartphones, which is like what we call PDAs. And it's just like this handheld tablet, like really old style tablets, and you couldn't really do much with them. And then Apple came up with this concept of an app, and that really changed the game. Even though it wasn't like conceptually much different to like what we had already, just the way that like Steve Jobs packaged it was really a game changer for like how we went about thinking of software. But then I moved over to Android a few years later, just because it gave me a bit more flexibility on what I can actually do. I feel like when I use an iPhone, it restricts my freedom, which for an average user I think is very good, because a normal user doesn't necessarily need to change absolutely everything. But for me, I just feel like I have a lot more freedom on an Android, and I can install the apps that I want, and I can build my own app and install it, and I don't have to go through the Apple App Store and get permission from them. So, and I kind of get that freedom with Windows as well. So that's why I've moved away from the Apple worlds. I still use Apple products, but I prefer the more open access that Windows and especially Linux offer me.
So, in the 2+ decades you've been doing this, technology moves fast. You've probably seen a lot of innovations, a lot of things between crypto and AI becoming kind of the catchphrases now, captivating everybody. But when you look back on the arc of your career, what has been one of your favorite projects to work on? What was one of the favorite developing technologies that you got into that you either loved or it made you grow and understand technology more?
This would have to be data science, in my opinion, because to kind of give you like a framework of where we are in technology. So like there's a lot of buzzwords, but the buzz around like AI at the moment, and like it's fantastic where we are, but it's not where we need to be, and it's not where we're going to be in another 5 years. So like what we call AI is really just a big pattern recognition system.
Yeah.
And I started working on this uh back in like 2010, and what we called them back then was called expert system, where it's just like big database. And at the time, I was working on medical diagnosis, so I was working with some doctors to try and like get all their knowledge into a database and then build a program that would be able to you input your symptoms, and then it would be able to tell you what your diagnosed illness was. So that's like the very first form of like what we call AI today. But it's an expert system where it's just like a bunch of data and you're doing some analysis and you're trying to make some patterns out of it. And then around like 2016, I got really heavy into data science. And so data science is pre what we call AI. And this is really just analyzing large amounts of data and trying to make sense of it. And this kind of gave me an eye opener to some previous work I did in the space where I was analyzing Facebook data and trying to figure out, okay, how do we monetize that? How do you predict user behavior? So you have all this data, like Facebook collects all this data, and they want to be able to have tailored ads. And so I started to learn like, okay, with this data, you can actually determine or predict human behavior with a very good accuracy. And people kind of look at that now and think, oh, like it's magic and spy, or these computers are spying on me. But it's not spying. It's actually just pattern recognition, based on the fact that what we do on a daily basis is fairly predictable. And that's how these data models actually come to life and they're effective. And so this was kind of like a very interesting phase of my life when I was working in this like pre-AI company, which is we now call it AI, but before then we didn't call it AI. But it's just like analyzing big amounts of data and trying to make sense of it. And so from that, we've turned it into large language models where we call it AI. It's not technically AI yet because it doesn't have the intelligence component, but it's just like making sense of all this very large, complicated data sets and trying to get something sensible that a normal human can understand. So that's kind of been one of the pivotal parts in like technology, like going from back when I started, where it's like you really have to um, go step by step with computers, where like I have to be really cautious about what instructions I give, really low level, to now I have this large language model that writes the code for me. So I just tell it what I want the computers to do, and then it figures it out. So like now English is becoming like the programming language, and I think this is going to become even more prominent in the coming years where we don't necessarily need to think in programming languages anymore. We will need to think programmatically, but we don't necessarily need to learn a programming language.
So, if you can meet anybody in the world of technology, you had mentioned Bill Gates, but if you can meet anybody that's doing great things right now or that's done it in the past, who would you love to meet? Who would you benefit the most from spending some time asking some questions and seeing how they operate?
Well, I would probably start with OpenAI. Like probably like someone who I don't yet know the name of. Like if I was going to like set up a meeting, it would be someone who is behind the scenes doing the day-to-day work of these large language models because I think they're doing a lot of really fascinating things. And I think the most interesting people to actually have these conversations with are the people that you don't know about.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's why like I don't have a name yet, but
Yeah.
if I had like the opportunity to say, hey, you can meet anyone in the world right now, I would like go on LinkedIn and try and like find like who is the person who's behind the scenes that no one talks about yet, and but who's like has that influential position, who's like working on the day-to-day with building out these large language models.
So, what has been the motivation for you every day to do this work, to get into a field like technology that changes so rapidly, to be able to invent and adapt to people's tastes? What has been that desire to get up every day to do this work consistently for 2+ decades for you?
For me, it's been about the impact on the world and seeing people actually use the products and seeing humanity progress. So I'm very big on like humanity taking steps forward and always progressing. So that's really motivating to me, and seeing like that change over the last couple of decades has been enormous, where we've gone from, like I was saying, like really difficult systems to build to now we have technology in our hands and seeing that getting more and more sophisticated, getting smaller, getting more capable. And now we're getting to a point where the average person has everything at their fingertips. So I remember thinking early on, like the internet is going to be big, right? Where because now we have all this information at everyone's fingertips, but like actually kind of pushing through to go from like the information is available to now the information is actually usable. That's been a huge transformation. And now that the information is usable, we're going to hit this kind of tipping point where the progress of humanity is going to go exponentially. Just we're going to see it we think like progress up until this point has been rapid, but now we're approaching this tipping point where it's just going to be incomprehensible at a speed where we're going to keep on building. And so that's kind of another motivation because I see that with technology, we use technology to build the new technology. And that's why I've always liked using technology or building technology because I know that the technology I build today, someone else is going to use tomorrow to build something even better. And so it's very fast moving. It's really hard to keep up, but that's what keeps it so exciting. Because I know like what I learned 5 years ago is no longer useful to me today. So every single day I have to keep up to date. I can't rely on what I learned 5 years ago because the industry just changes way too quickly.
Yeah. So of all of the, when you look at the timeline of your career and everything that you've innovated and developed, what are you the proudest of? What rises to the top for you?
Yeah, that's a good question because I generally don't like to like take credit on like things because everything is like a collaborative effort of like a bunch of team members. But if we just kind of pick things out, um, like what kind of stands like what comes to mind is like a artificial intelligence system where it was really helping larger companies kind of make sense of their data. So we had some partnerships with Walmart, and some other like influential companies just trying to analyze that data. But then, then more recently, I've been a lot more passionate about crypto technology. So I built a couple of stable coins that a lot of people use. And I've been very fascinated by like synthetic assets and bringing equal access. So that's like the more impactful stuff that is less like corporate, but more that the end users will actually use. And so that's probably something that kind of keeps me more motivated is like in recent times like bringing new protocols to life that a lot of people around the world not only use but it also fundamentally changes their lives like that's why I continue to build out what I'm building because it brings these opportunities to people who never had those opportunities. So for example I built a savings account that is open access to everyone, and now people can put their money into this app and start to earn savings. So now essentially everyone has access to a bank account, and even if they're in these countries where they can't rely on their banking system, or their governments have failed them or betrayed them, stolen their money, but now they have access to this new financial system. And I've really enjoyed seeing people use this on a daily basis. So that's kind of like really keeps me motivated, just seeing people using these systems.
So I'm 52. I've been in technology my whole life and I love it. I remember my first Packard Bell I bought in 93. I remember the sound of the modem and all of these different things. Like my first Mac, I got into Macs in '08. I got my first MacBook, which was wonderful. But my favorite device of all time is always going to be the iPhone 4. It was blocky. It was before all the apps flew at you. There was something about it that I really enjoyed. What about you in your life? What is the tech device, the gadget that you to this day hold as one of your favorites of all time?
I would actually say it's the iPhone 3.
Okay.
Um, like the one before that, because that's when it clicked to me. Because before that, I was using the PDAs, right? And
Yeah.
they were cool, but like it just wasn't clicking. It
Yeah.
wasn't clicking until the iPhone 3, and then I was like, this is something that people are gonna spend all days on. And like this was a time when like it was just unheard of or unthinkable that you would spend so much time on a device. Now we don't even think about it. Like everyone spends enormous amounts of time on their phones. But like back then, when we talk about phone, we talk about like the flip phones and like these all these like huge like telephone devices that you kind of carry around and like they're not that useful. And to me, it was like, yeah, the iPhone 3 that really changed my mind on like where technology is going to go. Like if technology is going to get smaller, it's going to get more powerful, and it's going to get more ingrained because that was like the moment for me where I saw like the future is like where we have technology in our hand is going to get embedded onto our wrists. So now we're starting to see smartwatches, and we're going to go further than that. Like now we're always seeing like smart glasses. We're going to go further than that. We're going to get it in our ears. We're going to eventually get it connected to our brains. And so that's going to be scary for a lot of people, but like that's where we're headed, because we are going to turn into cyborgs. Like technology, we're already functional cyborgs where like we cannot live without our phones. Like if you talk to the average person, like they're just not going to survive in this world without using technology. And so technology is going to become further and further ingrained. Right now we have a phone is an extension. Like if you've ever lost your phone, you kind of know this feeling where you're feeling naked, right? You're feeling like you're missing something, like something just doesn't feel right. You feel like you're vulnerable, like someone's taken away part of you. So like this is what's going to happen where we're going to go where like technology is going to actually become part of our bodies. And we're starting to see that already with these brain interfaces. And so that's scary, but it's also very fascinating and very exciting.
So, Robert, if anyone wants to reach out, learn more about what you're doing, any of the good work in your world, where's the best place for people to go?
Best place at the moment is to head over to X, search up my project Mynth, so Mynth. You can also find my personal account, Synthalover. And then if you find the website, you can also find our Discord. So if you go to mynth.ai, you'll find our Discord link, and from there you can connect with me directly and also ask any questions you want.
Excellent. Robert, this has been wonderful. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take care.